What's up, Internet? You're tuning in to episode 115 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined as always by my very good friend and co-host this week, Mr. Max Wright.
Ahoy, ahoy. How you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. I'm very excited to talk about some video games again. We do it all the time, don't we? Really, but it never gets any less exciting.
Yeah, right. Like it's I always joke with people whenever they're like, "You do how many podcasts a week?" It's like I'm telling you, man, it's out of my control, right? Because if it wasn't the podcast, I'd just be grabbing people on the street and accosting them with opinions
Yeah,
about Super Mario Brothers.
you'd be like,
So.
"Did you see this? Did you see this news?" And people are like, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "They acquired that company you've not heard of," and it's all fun.
But that's thankfully today I got my main man Max here. We've got a good episode for you. We are going to take a little. We're gonna pull out the map, right? As this year's winding down. Of course, as gamers, despite the fact that we are not even over with one of the best years for video game releases anyway, and we are already looking at the horizon, right? The question is, what comes next? What are the big publishers working on? And today we are going to focus on specifically PlayStation and talk about what they've got up their sleeves for
Hmm.
2024 and beyond. With Spider-Man 2 out the gate, right? That is kind of the last big piece of software that they had a date on, right? We know a couple
Yeah,
games are in active development. We can make some guesses about some other games that are on the way. But that was the last hard date we had.
yeah. We're 3 years into this generation, and at this point, looking forward, it looks like there's more hardware coming out than software. So let's speculate wildly, like you say, and let's just get it completely wrong because I've not even done all the stuff I want to do this year. I'm already thinking about what I don't know that I want to do
Yeah, I gotta
next
say,
year.
I
You
think it's
know,
very funny that you're like, it looks like there's more hardware than software. It's like, buddy, you can't even play all the games that came out this year.
yeah.
You're like, I need more
Doesn't make it
software
not
this
true.
console
Doesn't
generation.
make it not true. You know,
My man is drowning in a pile of games, and with his last gasp of air, he's like, "Where are all the games?"
where are all the games? That's what I want to know. I'm not looking behind me. I'm looking forward. Always looking forward. My neck.
You're
I'm
like a
not an
shark.
owl.
You gotta keep going forward, right?
Owl. I can't just look behind me and go, "There's all the games. Who?" And then drop a pellet or whatever. I've got to look forward.
You gotta be finding tastes. If you wanna, stay a tastemaker, you gotta taste.
What if I've played all the games that are worth playing this year already because I'm the number one tastemaker and therefore I would sniff them out like a pig looking for truffles?
How many different animals are you in this
Well,
metaphor?
I'm not an owl, so I'm just a pig,
Okay. All
but
right.
also a shark. So yeah,
A pig shark. That's kinda
pig
scary,
shark.
actually. I
All
don't know
right,
if I wanna.
I'm imagining it. I'm liking it. Let's get onto the games.
All right, let's get on to the games. I do wanna give a shout out to, two different Reddit users. One of them is, Rubsy, I'm gonna guess is how you say that.
Yeah, Rob C sounds good to me.
Who
Or
over on the Gaming Leaks and Rumors subreddit did a awesome post called "The Comprehensive Breakdown on the Future of PlayStation," which is just a really really good comprehensive look at all the games that have been either formally announced, games that have leaked, games that have had rumors told about them, and then stuff going on with the second, third party and stuff at Bungie, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good look at all the stuff that we can expect from PlayStation Studios and their partners in the next couple of years at least.
so basically, the Reddit user has split the post into regions, right? Japan,
Yeah,
Europe, North
Japan,
America.
Europe, North America, and
Let's
then
just
it's
do it like that.
all right, cool. So we'll
No
start with
fa
Japan.
because there's no favoritism, there's no, alphabetized nonsense. Don't believe in the alphabet, it's just what they've done here. So,
Okay,
yeah.
I'm into it. So starting with the Japan section, the first one we've got up is Polyphony Studios, right? Who's been around since 1998, most known for the Gran Turismo series. They just put out GT7 in March of 2022. So, and we know that there was also obviously the VR
Mhm.
interaction there that they had to work on as well. And then we do have an update from the studio's head, Kazunori Yamauchi, who said that they have already started development on Gran Turismo 8. So,
Is Gran Turismo a do you know what? I was gonna ask if it's an annual sorry, if it's a once per generation series like Smash Brothers is, and I realize that there's 8 of them and, or 7 of
So
them,
no.
and there's only 5 PlayStations. So, okay, I take that back. How long do these usually how often do these come out then? The fact they're
It
already
seems like
working
it's
on the
like
next one.
you get 1.5 a generation, right? It's like
Yeah,
depending on
yeah.
the generation, you may get 2, and I think it probably has more to do with, you gotta imagine early on, they were coming out more quickly because games
Mhm.
took less time to develop, right? Like, I'm imagining the first couple GTs were all on PS, 1 to 2, and then
I
we
think they were
probably
both
got to 1 a
PlayStation 1.
generation now because you gotta imagine if GT 7 just came out in 2022, they're starting development on 8. If it takes standard development time of, like, 4 to 6 years, we're probably inching up on it being a PS6 game rather than a late
Yeah.
PS5 game, right?
Why are they starting from scratch though? Surely, like, I can't imagine. I know this is obviously, me not a huge racing game kinda guy. Surely the GT7 is like if that's, like, as good as it can possibly be right now, I wanna know how what they're gonna do for I don't know. I'm obviously just, speculating here, but if it's not like an annual franchise like FIFA where they sort of, like, have to make changes every year or do these things, um, I just can't imagine what could be in 8 that's not already in 7 or why they can't just use 7 as a backbone and put new cars in. I don't
I
understand. I'm not gonna
mean,
pretend to understand.
so it looks like they did a GT Sport, which was like a spin-offs type
Mhm,
series, it looks like, and that was the last release before 7, that was in 2017, and that came, a couple of years after, GT6,
mhm.
but it's about the same amount of development time, like, you're
Okay,
looking
alright.
at the last from 5 to 7, there's been about 3 to 4 years between each of them.
Okay.
But the time between Sport and 7 is, like, the longest. So, I'm imagining that it's probably all about, pushing the graphical side of it,
Yeah,
right?
just
Because
visual
that's always such a
fidelity.
big thing in racing games is, like, the technical element of it and, like, bringing it to a even more photorealistic,
Sure.
status, adding more cars and, like, those really, like, kind of, small tweaks to physics and things like that that the diehards pay attention to and notice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I realise that I, don't know enough about GT to really actually have made any interesting points there, but, I I, uh, one final point, I am shocked that Gran Turismo 7 came out well over a year ago, like, over a year and a half ago. It was that long ago.
I know. It feels so much more recent to me.
It really does. It feels like I thought it was this year maybe, but obviously not. Next game. Go on, next studio.
Alright, so next up, we've got Team Asobi, who, is an interesting one, right? Technically, they were established in 2021 as like they're a spinoff of Studio Japan that got
Mhm.
shut down. And the last big thing that they worked on was they did Astro's Playroom for PSVR, and then there was what's it? Astrobot Rescue. Or no, I'm sorry. Astro's Playroom
Astro's
is the
Playroom is the
PS5 one.
yeah.
Rescue Mission is the PSVR title that
Yeah,
they had
yeah,
done
that's
previous to
the
that.
Reddit users' fault there, for doing
Yeah,
that.
they
So
they
it's
made a
been
little mistake there.
they did make a little mistake. So it's been about 3 years then since they sort of last released something.
And they've
I
been
see here
staffing up for the last couple of years, right? Like, they
yeah,
expanded
yeah.
their team, they grew by 35 employees, it looks like, and then another
Mhm,
60 or they got to more than 60 in
mhm.
2022. Their plan is to grow to 100 employees, and they said that their next, game is gonna be their biggest to date. I think it's pretty safe to assume that it's gonna be an Astrobot, like a full Astrobot,
That's their IP, isn't it?
yeah. And I
And
I
yeah,
feel
I mean
like the PS5 demo, like, exposed him to so many more people, right? Like,
yeah.
I think there's an audience for it now.
Also, I think you also need something big for the PSVR too. I think that sort of like came out the one big game came out for it. It's been a couple of updates and it's sort of just been not really doing much since then. And I
Yeah.
think having a big game and just to say we are still supporting this.
I
Yeah.
wonder if it'll be a VR title even though, because like, I'm imagining that their next game is gonna be like, a full-length version of Playroom that would just be
That
like
is
a
true.
more traditional 3D platformer just because, I mean, PSVR 2 was such a is as it flopped, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you got to imagine that they want them to make a game that's gonna, do, like, Ratchet and Clank numbers, not Astrobot Rescue Mission numbers.
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah, I mean, it's what been a couple of years now. If the PSVR one came out in 2020, no, wait, that was the main. What year did Astrobot VR come out? That could only been sort of 20.
Well, I mean, I would imagine that because I mean, the last thing that they did was Astro's Playroom, right?
That
So,
was in
like, that
2020,
was at
yeah.
launch of PS5, so, I mean, that's
Mhm. So
2020,
that was 3 years. What
right?
about the one before that? How long are we talking about, do you think? If they'd like
Playroom, I think it says here it was 2020, which
nah,
I
that was that's this is
oh,
their
yeah, that's
mistake again.
wrong. Yeah, so Rescue Mission is we need the release date for.
Astrobot
So,
Rescue Mission, I'm already on it, don't you worry. 2018, so that was 2 years.
2018, okay. So it's been a
So,
while.
yeah, I reckon 3 years, double stuff. It might be something we see fairly soon then.
This could be a thing that they actually like, the next, proper PlayStation showcase. I wouldn't be as
Yeah,
surprised if this was a thing they had to show off and it's done, or if it's,
I'm with
like,
you.
imminent, like, maybe this is a game we get next year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I would like that. I've also seen that Team Asobi here Team Asobi will focus on refining game controls to take full advantage of the PS5's DualSense controller, so it probably
Yeah.
won't be a VR game if that's the case. Nice to see the patented Asobi 3, bullet point section here for the Reddit post here, so that's good. So
Mm,
that's all the Japan studios, right,
maybe
which
next year is a little ambitious though, because 2020, I
I
don't
think it's
know.
possible. I
They're
mean,
scaling up the team too, though. It's like,
they've clearly been working on something. They must have been working on something.
yeah. I hope it's coming
It's
soon.
it's a shame that that's where Japan ends now for Sony, that, Japan studio's gone and, yeah, it's a shame that
It's kinda
that
crazy, right?
yeah.
Like a company that's, so rooted in Japanese game
Mhm.
development. But I mean, I guess when you think back, like, a lot of the early exclusives for it were also from the
Oh,
West,
yeah.
so
I think they've sort of, like, as the Japanese sales have maybe not dwindled, but, like, when you look at Japan, Nintendo's always gonna be up there, PlayStation's always sort of gonna be down here-ish, and they found more of a success in the West and in Europe and in the US.
yeah,
I
and,
can
like, they're
see why they've done that.
the games that their Western studios develop are super popular in Japan, right? Like,
Exactly,
Ghost of
yeah.
Tsushima was a huge hit over there,
Yeah.
right? Made by, Sucker Punch in, the American Northwest, right? I think
Yeah,
they're
I
in
think it makes sense, and the
Washington.
fact that they're now, a lot of it's being run in Europe. You've got Herman Holst. He's, the top of the PlayStation Studios team now, isn't he? And he's
Yeah.
in Europe, so I can see why they're focusing on that. So speaking of Europe, let's
Yeah,
talk
so
about the European studios.
let's jump over to Fire Sprite is the next one.
Never heard of them.
They've been around since
Genuinely never heard of them.
they've been around since 2013. Their
Mhm.
their most recent project was Horizons Call of the Mountain, which was obviously the big exclusive play they made for PSVR 2. So you got to imagine, so allegedly they're working on a AAA branching narrative adventure game that is being described as an ambitious dark narrative blockbuster action adventure game that's decision based, and it's codenamed Heartbreak, and it's a survival horror game. So
That's that yeah,
that's pretty cool.
that's pretty
I,
cool. That's a
I
lot.
it is a lot, but I think you can see that filling the gap that has been left by, Supermassive, right? Like,
Mhm.
Until Dawn was such a great exclusive for PS4, and, that was a studio that I think a lot of people, myself included, were surprised that they never put a ring on. So,
Yes.
the idea that, hopefully Fire Sprite can work on something like this that's, like, a little bit more mainstream and,
Mhm.
like, can secure the future of their studio to, not be tied to VR, which is I think a business Sony is probably not gonna continue to invest in for much longer.
Yeah, I think so too. Interesting, here that it's an action adventure decision based game, which is unique. Unless one of those maybe isn't, unless it's more like Heavy Rain than like Until Dawn, where there is sort of extra, elements
It's
of
like a
action
little
and
bit of
stuff like
both.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be interesting. Yeah,
And then, the other stuff, there's a couple things that they allegedly have in
there's a
development.
few things going on here,
Yeah, I
isn't
didn't
there?
realize that they had such a big team, but I guess it's also possible that they're in that, pre-production phase where they have multiple games in pre-production, then they'll pick
Hmm.
1 or 2 of these projects and move forward with it. Because the other, thing that's been rumored is that they are potentially working on Twisted Metal. We knew that that was being worked on by the team behind, Destruction All Stars, and then that game obviously didn't do very well. And the Twisted Metal game that they were working on, I guess didn't stand up to internal review, and they pulled it from them and allegedly have given it to Fire Sprite. So that's another one that you know you talk about like PlayStation's. desire to make live service stuff. And like I could see a future where there's like a, small approachable Twisted Metal game that works as like an online multiplayer thing. And I could see myself being into that. I would kind of like it if it was a little more traditional and there was that story mode and everything, because Twisted Metal is a fun IP. I don't think it's something that
Yeah.
is like too old fashioned to be brought back, you
And it's
know?
bound to be interest is bound to be renewed by the TV show that's coming out. You know, you have a big star like Anthony Mackie heading it up.
Yeah.
It's bound to
That
be
did come out,
because
by the way.
oh, it's already come out?
Yeah, it's on Peacock, and I know you guys don't have that, so I don't.
No.
You're waiting for it to
Oh,
come to
okay.
Netflix or something, I guess.
I'm not asked, but I'm sure there are people that are. But okay, then interest has been renewed in the EP if in the IP if you're from
Yeah.
America and were aware it was coming out. Um, and yeah, I mean, I didn't actually know that. I knew there was something happening. I didn't know that Destruction All Star developer had it taken away from them. Good because that game was just bad. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I could stand to not have that team work on an IP that I
Yeah,
like.
I need to see. I need to while you talk about whatever the next bit is here. I need to look at what Fire Sprite have actually worked on because they're giving them a lot for a studio that I've not heard of. Which
Yeah, take a look at some of their other projects. They've been around for a while. They've got a couple things
yeah.
under their belt. So they also are apparently working on a multiplayer shooter that's supposed to be part of the live service structure. Last week Steve and I had a conversation about our doubts about the longevity of PlayStation's plans for live service. So, I wonder how something like that sticks around and if it does, but I guess we'll see. Because if the gameplay is there, then, I could maybe that's one that they do roll the dice on. And then they also made a new internal team dedicated to working on mobile games, and then they apparently have a mobile game in development. So we'll see what that looks like too.
I'm pretty sure Sony had like a big push a few years ago for mobile games. They were going to start releasing them under one of their music brands, and then I just don't think anything's ever really come from that.
Yeah, and then they acquired another studio as well, I believe, and then they started like a PlayStation Mobile like imprint,
Hmm.
and they talked about it in their earnings report from last year, I guess was the one that Steve and I broke down, and they at the time anyway, we're talking about seeing mobile as an increased part of their business and like something that they want to see be a bigger part of their revenue share.
Hmm.
But they've only put out a few things here or there. Really, it's not much has come of it. They did have and I don't think it was developed internally, but it's a Sony IP. They had that Sackboy Infinite Runner that came out pretty recently and was
Hmm.
not successful. Um, so yeah, it's interesting because you got to imagine that they still want to get their hands in that mobile pie. But what I was talking about last week is I wonder uh, how much they continue to invest in some of these things as we move into a recession, and you see these big companies generally get more risk averse when they've had a few high profile failures, you
Hmm.
know, or not even a few, I guess, right? Maybe one or two, but they invested money years ago and there hasn't been that return. So um, I don't know. It's obviously still something that's developing, right? And we'll see what happens there.
Oh
But
yeah, one day, yeah.
Fire Sprite, being one of their more, they're developing talent studios. It's interesting to see them, trying to make something work there.
Final mention of Fire Sprite in my little search I did there. They apparently did some work or are doing some work for Star Citizen. So let's see if that ever
Gotcha.
comes out.
Okay. All right, so then next up, we've got Guerrilla Games, obviously best known for Killzone historically, and then now Horizon. They've been around
Hmm.
since 2000. We know that they've got, I think it's a foregone conclusion, right? But they've also confirmed the third installment of Horizon is in development, which
Hmm.
is surprising no one. So we
No,
know that
absolutely not.
that's obviously on the way. There's rumored to be a remaster of the original game, right, for PS5. um, that's supposed to be in active development. So that's another project that I think is a safe bet, right? You imagine that's coming in a couple years
Yeah.
and
I wonder what that means for the PC version. I wonder if they're going to sort of make you rebuy it again, or if they're going to release that as an
like a free
update.
update. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what the plan is there because if it's exactly the same game and all they've done is, I mean, there might just be an upgrade cost like there is on PlayStation. You never know.
Yeah. Or I don't know. Like maybe to your point, it's just like it's on PC, so you just run it at a higher specs and
Yeah.
it's you don't need to. It's like BioShock did that, right? Where you did the BioShock remaster, but on PC you just got a
Oh,
patch,
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know?
I remember that. Hmm.
So then some of the other projects that we know that have been talked about, right, is that there's supposed to be a Horizon online co-op game that
Did we talk
we
about this?
we talked about it a while ago. Steve and I talked
Yeah.
about the leaked footage, and it has this kind of like um cartoonish look to it. It's like
Yeah, I
almost like
remember.
Fortnite-y, or something
Mhm.
like that. Um, that is another game that like I don't know, right? Like I could see that being a game we never see, and that it's kind of like the Last of Us factions sequel that's,
Yes.
currently languishing behind the scenes. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a game that, you know, never really comes to fruition.
If it was intended to be like a live service thing, I think it makes sense that we don't see it considering they are sort of scaling back, aren't they, really? They're, a lot of their live service stuff we know, from last week's discussion. So
At least that's what
I
we
wonder
believe.
if yeah, yeah, I wonder what happens here. But yeah.
So on top of that, we also had a rumor. There was a report a while back that there was going to be an MMO as well, and that it was going to be developed by NC Soft, who is the studio behind Lineage and Guild Wars. We'll see. That's another one. I could see that making sense, right? Like obviously PlayStation has been making a push to have more content on PC, and that's, a franchise that, if you get that going on both SKUs, that's something that could obviously have a pretty good player base if the interest is there. Uh MMOs are a tough, a tough nut to crack sometimes, but obviously,
Yeah.
NC Soft is a really talented studio, and Guild Wars has been one of the more successful MMOs of like the modern era. So yeah, we'll see. And then apparently they've got a mobile game in development as well. But there's conversation on whether that's a new game or is it just a mobile skew of one of these multiplayer projects that they have in development or are overseeing. And
But
that remains
I
to be seen.
I think there's too much going on here personally. I think I'm gonna say this a lot, but they're doing too many things and they're not releasing any of them yet. So I
Yeah,
think focus on one
I
each.
think I think something that's important to like think of when you look at something like this though, right, is like how many of these projects are being worked on by, the same team, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like, the MMO is not impacting the development of Horizon 3, right? And the remake is probably going to be made on the same um with the same system that produced The Last of Us Part 1 remastered, where it's like, okay, active development ends on Horizon 2 and its DLC, right? And you have all these programmers and, coders that are sitting around waiting for the next, game to exit pre-production and be ready for active development, and they get to work on a remaster in the background, right? And then they get pulled off and put on that project as, you know, um priority shifts around to these other things that are in development. So like, yeah, but I mean, I don't think that Horizon needs a co-op game and an
Yeah,
MMO.
is the IP that strong? I know Horizon games they're popular, but they keep getting, overshadowed by games that are releasing at the same time. Is the IP strong enough? Has the audience been receptive enough to the Horizon IP that they're like, "Cool, let's make 6 games in this world," you
And I
know?
I guess there's an argument to be made that the audience that's gonna show up for the MMO is not the same audience that shows up
Mhm.
for the single player game, and maybe there's some crossover, right? But, like, it's probably less about, like, are the existing fans of Horizon gonna go play this MMO, and
Yeah.
can we make an MMO that appeals to MMO fans in a new universe that they can get invested in, right?
Yes, yeah. But then, like, why would you not just make a new universe, as opposed to putting it in the if you're
Well,
not trying
because
to if you're not trying
I
to
think that's
cross
That's the thing
progression,
though, right? Is like when it comes to IP development, like developing a new world,
Mm.
like that's well realized, takes a lot of time and money and investment, and expanding an existing IP that you're trying to grow as a brand is easier, right? Because it's like, okay, cool. We need to make an MMO. We need a universe. We have Horizon. There are already existing factions. There are already, all these creature designs and all this stuff that you can convert into this new type of game and this new style of game, right? And like I think that's the same with the co-op thing, right? Where it's like the original vision of Horizon was as almost like it was like a two-player thing and it had this almost like Monster Hunter energy to it. And you can see how that would work as a multiplayer project that maybe appeals to a totally different audience than the people that want to see the end of Aloy's story, right? But I don't know. It's tough to say because it's like I think an IP is as strong as the things that come out in it. So if the game comes
Yeah,
out and it's great, then it's like, okay, like there's a lot in that world to explore
yeah.
and expand on, you know?
I do think that there is a part of the sort of leak culture and part of the releasing things like this, or people like releasing things without before the company's officially released it. You can get these things in your head, like I've been saying about how, oh, there's too much, or this doesn't sound good, and it's weird. These are just things people are talking about. There's nothing confirmed. There's nothing like actively releasing yet. So
Yeah,
it's
and
hard for
that's
me to really
there's
comment
so
too
many
hard on it.
projects that enter development and never come out,
Yeah,
right? Like it's like you look at how many specials that like Did You Know Gaming has been able to do over the last couple of years of like, here's this unreleased game that we found.
yeah.
And like here, it's like,
There's a big one I want to watch later on, but we're busy doing this now, so I can't watch it. But there's a great big video. Um,
so
well, that's Guerrilla Games.
yeah, that's Guerrilla Games. Next up
Let's
we
move
got
on.
Housemark.
Good studio.
Great studio, recent acquisition, right? One that's been around with PlayStation for a minute, and now they are finally a part of the first party. They just
Mhm.
worked on Returnal. We know that they're working on a new IP, and there's right now no plans for any sequels, and that's not usually their bag. They usually are kind of like a one and done studio. Um, so I think for them, it's kind of a big question mark. I would imagine we will see another similar attempt at like how do we take the classic arcadey kind of gameplay that we're
Bullet
known
Hell.
for and
Mhm.
present it in a triple A
Yeah, I
way?
mean, Returnal was still my favorite PlayStation 5 exclusive, and it did a lot for it took roguelikes, made them AAA. It took, like you say, bullet hell stuff and made it AAA and merged the two in a 3D way that really impressed me. And I'm really looking forward to whatever it is that they are working on. But it does seem like we're going to be waiting for quite a while for this one. So yeah, but that's fine.
Yeah,
That's
I
fine.
mean,
These good things take time.
yeah, absolutely. I think your best case scenario is that they get another game out by the end of this console generation.
Yeah,
I think it's just as likely though that you don't see it until early PS6 because
yeah,
now that they're an official first party and this is going to be their first game with PlayStation's resources, I got to imagine that they really want to put their full weight behind it and like swing for the fences and do
yeah,
something bigger and more ambitious than what they've done before, which Returnal already was.
yeah.
So to take a step up from that is going to take some time.
We are half an hour into this conversation, and we have not spoken about a single officially revealed or announced game. Just so that everyone at home is following along. Um,
All right, let's keep it moving. Next up, we got London Studio.
never heard of them.
Oh, come on. You don't know London?
I know
Sony
London very
London?
well. I live like half an hour away from London, but I don't know the studio.
Man, you got to check them out. They've been around since '93. They got all kinds of stuff under their
That's
belt.
I've been around since '93. Doesn't mean everyone's heard of me.
Well, their last big game was Blood and Truth, which was another PSVR title, right?
Oh, that's why I haven't heard of them.
And yeah, that's probably why you haven't been up
Huh.
on what they've been doing lately. But they've done like a lot of Sony's like peripheral stuff. Like they made games for the iToy. They made SingStar,
They
which was
did
like
make SingStar. They made
their
iPet,
yeah.
Gang of
So
London,
they they
which is a spin-off of the Getaway series, which has also had a spin-off TV series come out. There's a lot going on here, actually. Fair play to them.
yeah. So that's like their kind of big claim to fame is like doing peripheral stuff. Blood and Truth was kind of their first like more like narrative driven experience, right? And
Mhm.
it's first person shooter, or not first. Mean, I guess technically, right? It's a VR shooter, and I don't know it's interesting, right? Because what we have here is their next game is this new project that's they've talked about, and it's again like a pretty big departure for the studio, where it's like
Mhm.
seemingly not a VR project. It's supposed to be a new IP that takes place in a modern fantasy version of London. So
Mhm.
it's and I
All of their
believe
games are set in London, just so you know. I've just so far I've looked at all of their games.
yeah,
Every single one is set in London.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Does make sense. They have a London studio.
So they said our overarching theme is about bringing fantastical and magical elements and intersecting that with familiar worlds. You don't get much more familiar to us than London, right?
Because 'cause they've made
Obviously.
4 games, 5 games set in London.
Oh, and they live there.
They do live
Um,
there. They do.
and my understanding from like the concept art that I've seen is that it's like uh, you're in modern day London and like a portal opens or something, and all these magical creatures like start pouring in, and
Yeah.
that's gonna be kind of
I'm
the
looking at
conceit
it
of it.
now. There's a
Um,
dragon and there's some people and the people have horns and yeah, this looks pretty cool. Oh, this is the first announced game, even though it is still called unannounced game. Um, but yeah, looks this is the closest to being a real game that I've seen. It sounds interesting. I doubt I'll play it, but go to London and fight dragons in real life. So
as one does.
as one does.
I'm theoretically interested in this. It's like I think it really depends on what the game is. It's supposed to be like an online co-op thing, which doesn't appeal to me, but
Yeah.
um, you know,
I
I
wonder
like
what
the
weird peripheral
idea.
Sony are bringing out to play this. Is it we created a wand peripheral and London studio have created an entire game around it. Is that going to be the kind of thing, or do you reckon this is going to be like a proper? Sorry, let me do that in quotation marks. A proper PS5 sit down with a controller kind of game.
That's kind of what I think. Because like I said, right? Like I said earlier, I think that Sony is moving away from VR. I think that PSVR 2 being a failure is going to be similar to like what the Vita was, where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, we did the first one and it was popular, and let's follow it up with another thing, and it doesn't connect, and they stop supporting it, so it doesn't, grow an audience, and it becomes this kind of forgotten thing. And I think trying to get them to uh, you know, gas themselves up to go release a third VR headset, right, is like probably not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So now you're at a point where I think you're gonna look at the studios that, had VR projects in development or that have primarily worked on VR projects or whatever, and you're going to reevaluate whether or not they can do something else, right? Or whether or not they fit in the portfolio anymore. And I wonder if that's what happened with uh oh, I can't remember their name. The studio that did Concrete Genie. Um
Uh, nope.
they
It's never gonna happen. I'm never gonna get
it's
it.
like right on the tip of my tongue. They just got shut down, right? And
Oh,
I
Pixel Opus.
Pixel Opus, that's right.
I've just
And
scrolled down this list to find them, but
both of their like big Sony projects were games that did okay and were received okay. And there was a rumor that they might be working on a VR project. And I'm not surprised that that got canceled, right?
yeah,
Given what happened with VR. So like the idea that they have Sony London, right, which is a studio that's historic, right? Has been around for a really long time and has been part of the portfolio for a long time. That they would want to pivot them away from making peripheral stuff and try to make something that is more traditional and that fits into their vision for the next era of PlayStation. And like,
yeah,
we're not doing peripherals, we're doing online multiplayer games. So why don't you guys pitch us your online multiplayer game?
yeah.
You know,
Finally put London on the map, guys.
let's do it.
Finally.
So next up, we got Media Molecule. They are, of course, the studio behind Little Big Planet. Historically, their biggest, their most recent project was Dreams. That game, just like they announced that it's going to be shut down in September of 2023. The game is, not. I'm sorry, support has ended as of 2023. You can still buy it. You can still experience what is there, but there's
Mhm.
no more active development on it. They're not going to be updating it or fixing bugs or anything like that moving forward. They did confirm that they are going to be working on a new IP and that it's not going to be a Dreams 2. It's not them refining or revisiting that idea. I think they're given that it's a entirely new project, I think it's probably pretty likely that they're not going back to Little Big Planet,
Yeah, I think it's gonna be
which
something
was
new.
go ahead.
Who did I think it's gonna be something new, but they didn't work on, Sackboy, did they? That was
No, that
another
was another
studio that works with
studio,
Sackboy.
yeah. So,
Thought so.
like, I feel like that would have been the safe thing to do, but I imagine that similarly to what we just said about London, I think that's what we're gonna see from what's next for Media Molecule. I think it's
Mhm.
gonna not be a creation tool, sharing type game. I think it's going to be something that's a little bit more traditional, and that it's
Mhm.
going to just try to be a hit that sells, so that the studio can continue to exist.
Well, they also
Because
dropped
they,
a bunch of staff, didn't
yeah,
they?
they just laid off about 20%, 15 to 20% of their staff.
Yeah, which doesn't it's not a good look, but and also I think the main creative guy behind the one who's been there since the beginning, the I think he was a director or creative director, something like that. He has also left the studio recently, so
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like they're in a good way, but,
No.
let's see what they're working on, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, aside from, like, those 2 projects, right, like, Tearaway is the only other IP that they have under their belt, and that is, like, a more traditional platformer.
Mhm,
I would guess that's what we're getting next from them, is something that's like that, and that is gonna just try to be a win and prove
mhm,
that they can make stuff that's more commercially viable again.
mhm.
So next up, we got Nixies. They're the, studio that ports games to PC. I think, we know that they've got a bunch of those projects that they've worked on recently, and I think it's to me. I would imagine the next thing that they do is Ghost of Tsushima. That seems like the most obvious next IP to bring to PC.
Personally, I feel like if that was going to happen, it would have already happened. The fact that we've already got, Ratchet& and Clank, the fact we've already got, Horizon 2 coming soon, both the Spider-Man games, like Miles Morales is already out, um, Last of Us Part 1's already out. All of these games that have come out since Ghost of Tsushima's been out, why would they do Ghost of Tsushima over, like, Last of Us Part 2, for example, where Last of Us Part 1 is already available on PC? I don't
I
know.
think it's a timing thing. Like, I
Yeah.
imagine you get Ghost of Tsushima coming to PC not too close to the release of Ghost of Tsushima 2, but kind of in the run up to it, so that you can expose a new audience to the IP and kind of put it back in the conversation as
Mhm.
we're ramping up to the sequel. Because I think my follow up would be, why wouldn't you put it out? Right? It's a new IP that they're trying to get over, and that was really successful and really popular around the world, right? And it's like, knowing that Horizon, like, came, what, a couple years after it came out, right? I
So
mean,
Horizon came out, what, end of last year? No, beginning of last year, 'cause it came out around the same time as Elden Ring, didn't it? Um,
is that
and
right?
it's coming out beginning of 2024, so it's been 2 years for Horizon Forbidden West. The trailer just absolutely blasted my eardrums when I opened the Steam page for that there.
So it was 2 years ago?
I think it came out, the same year as sorry, it must have been a year ago 'cause, when was Elden Ring? That was last year,
It's
beginning of
okay,
last year.
it dropped in 2020, which means it came out about
What did?
3 years later than the game originally did. So, we're
We're talking about Horizon sorry, I'm talking about Forbidden West, not,
oh, I got you, my bad.
sorry, yeah, that's where the confusion is.
Yeah, I
So
was
I'm
saying
talking about Forbidden
Zero
West came
Dawn
out
came to PC about 3 years after the original release.
yes, yeah, whereas Horizon Forbidden West came out last year, so it'll be 2 years when it finally gets to PC. So that'll be 2 years. Miles
Yeah.
Morales, I think was I'm gonna sneeze, I'm really sorry.
Bless you, bless
Back
you.
in the game, back in the game, thank you. Um, Miles Morales, another one that came out, oh, probably around 2 years as well, actually. Same with I think we're down to about 2 years. Sackboy, I think, was 2 years. I think a lot of these games are now around 2 years out, but, by the time Ghost even gets announced, it'll probably be close to 3 years since that game came out.
Yeah, which, it's longer than I expected. I'm kinda surprised it hasn't happened already, but I don't
Mm.
think it's so long that it is like it doesn't make sense to do anymore, you know? So then we've got Savage Game Studios, which is, one of their mobile game devs, excuse me, and they're working on a new unannounced AAA mobile live service action game.
So many
That's
of
all
that
we got.
I dislike so much of that.
So we'll see what happens. All right, so that wraps it up for Europe. We're going to talk about the North American studios in just a second here. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of November. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Pilkey, Snackago, Ty the Dude, and Wakahula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the reals to the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. Remember, if you want to go check out those sister shows, if you want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes, or if you want to go above and beyond to show your support, just like all those fine folks did, you can do all that and much, much more at flipscreen.games. That's our website. Head over there, click on stuff, however you choose to get involved. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. All right, next up, we're going to move over to the North American studios. We got Bend, which is the team that most recently worked on Days Gone. We know that they're working on a new IP, and apparently it is going to have a multiplayer element and that it will build on the open world systems of Days Gone. We know it's been in development, active development, for at least 2 years. But, I mean, 2 years is not much. So
It's not much time at all.
I
No.
would imagine this is at best a end of PS5 game, probably more likely a PS6 game.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it says here that it's building on the open world systems of Days Gone, which I would say, oh, cool, that's gonna cut down development time. Then it also says there's a whole multiplayer element to it. So, yeah, that's gonna take some time.
Yeah, yeah, could definitely be
Hmm.
one that we're not going to see for quite some time. So then we know the next one up is Blue Point Games, right? And we know that they've said that they're working on a original game, which is interesting, right? Because obviously everybody has talked about, that's their whole thing was taking these old games, porting them to modern consoles and making them feel new again, right?
Brand new. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Brand spanking new.
So like they just did Demon Souls, that was their last big release, and obviously that was great. There is
Really
now
good.
kind of that question of the fact that they're working on a original game. Does that mean a new IP? And most people are
Hmm.
leaning towards no. It probably means that they're going to become a studio who comes in and revives dormant IP that the original developer is no longer interested in working on, right? And that's led to a lot of conversation where some people have said, like maybe that means we'll get a sequel to Bloodborne from them, right? Because they worked on Demon Souls, and obviously PlayStation owns the Bloodborne IP. People have been dying for a sequel or a re-release of some kind, and
Hmm.
it's not come to fruition.
Yes, I have.
But then
My
there's
my
also there's
sorry, I
also
was gonna.
oh no,
Uh,
go ahead. Sorry.
God, sorry, I was gonna say that where people talk about Blue Point and Bloodborne, I think the reason that they talk about Blue Point is that when Sony killed Japan Studio, they really sort of lost a, pretty large part of what made Bloodborne Bloodborne, and that the only Sony first party studio that's worked on something similar to Bloodborne is Blue Point with the Demon Souls, and I think that's probably why people
They
have
get it.
put them together. They've done it. They get it. Well, I mean, how much of that they actually get from the design standpoint, or what they get from a just a remake standpoint, because they could make Bloodborne look incredible,
Totally.
but yeah.
I mean, didn't they also take unfinished bosses from the first game and add them though? So it's like they've technically, I think, touched new quote unquote content in
I
that
don't I
engine.
don't maybe, I'm not sure. I don't remember
Look that up if
playing
you can,
anything.
because I
Yeah.
feel like I remember that being a talking point when it came out. But obviously, I'm not a Souls guy, so um, y'all can correct me in the comments. So the other rumor that has come around is that they were working on a new Infamous game, but Sucker Punch came out and said that wasn't the case. So we know it's not Infamous, but I think there's a lot of IP, obviously, that's been sitting around for a while that you could see them maybe taking another shot at. Maybe something like a Sly Cooper, or like a Siphon Filter, or like one of these other franchises that's kind of just been sitting, getting dust. Ape Escape, I don't know.
Sorry, I was just looking up the thing, and it doesn't seem like they did. I think there was people were saying that they could take the cut content for it. They never actually did.
Gotcha, okay. Thank you
Sorry,
for clarifying.
back to you. No, that's fine. Back to you.
So, I mean, we'll see, right? But I think I would bet they're gonna revive an IP that's been on the shelf and that's ready for a new coat of paint and a new entry.
Hmm. You said Ape Escape towards the end there, and that would be pretty cool.
I'd love that. That'd be so much fun. Next up, we got Haven Studios, which is Jade Raymond's new studio. It's called Fair
Oh
Games, right?
yeah,
This was that one that we saw that heist PvP live service game at their last big presentation. So this
yeah,
is
yeah,
one
yeah.
that it's in early active development. We'll see it soon. All right, so next up we got Insomniac, obviously, Ratchet and Clank, Spider-Man, kind of their most recent claims to fame. We just put out Spider-Man 2. We have, I think, and uh, it's tough to talk about what could come out of that game without spoilers. So I'm gonna right now warn you of light spoilers potentially for Spider-Man 2. And if you want to avoid any of those, I'd just skip ahead a couple minutes. We'll throw a time code down below. Um, so I think it's obvious that a Spider-Man 3 is going to come. I think the question on everybody's mind is there going to be a DLC, right? That's like the city that never sleeps. And could we get a spin-off um in the way that we got like a Miles Morales? And I think that
Mhm.
through Spider-Man 2, there's a lot of stuff that was set up, right? Like spoilers will begin now. Okay. We had Carnage, right, set up at the
Mhm.
end of one of the side quests, so you could do like a that could be in the DLC or that could be a thing that comes down the line. There's that, I think nod to what could potentially be setting up a Venom spinoff, right? Like where you play as Venom briefly during the game, and I think that's a thing that could be the where you do Carnage, right? Is in
Yep.
A Venom spinoff.
And
Um,
they heavily, talk about, Chameleon. There's a whole series of side quests that ends in Chameleon
mhm.
basically being like, "Coming for you," sort of
and
teasing, toying with Spider-Man.
And you could easily see that be a DLC like
Mhm.
the we got with the Tombstone stuff in City That Never Sleeps. There's the setup of the Spider-Verse stuff, which that could be something that comes back into play maybe in Spider-Man 3. I could see that also being something that you do in a spin-off game, or maybe you use that as an excuse to pull in other like spider characters and you do like a Spider-Man 2099 spin-off or a Spider-Gwen spin-off or Silk, right, who's introduced at the end of the game. There's a lot you could do there, and I think any of those make sense. There's also obviously Wolverine, active development. We know that that's right around the corner. Right now, the you know, the original planned launch was supposed to be fall 2024, and now apparently the rumor is 2025. So who knows? Maybe that's a game we get into next year, but it seems increasingly like it's probably not coming next year, which
Yeah, we need to see it first, really. I think for it to be if it to be coming out within a year, I think we probably would have seen something of it by now, maybe, other than just that one teaser, or they would have mentioned it more. But I mean, if that's according to
yeah,
Jeff Grubb, and Jeff Grubb's generally pretty on the money with these things, but plans change all the time.
right. Yeah. So I think you're definitely right. Um And I imagine if we're getting DLC for Spider-Man, that would come next year too. So it's like,
Yeah,
are
it's
they really
weird
doing
because
both of those things in a year? I don't think so.
City That Never Sleeps, I'm pretty sure only came out like a month or two after the original launch of Spider-Man.
I
I'm
don't think it
pretty
was
sure.
that soon, was it?
No.
Let me see. I feel like it had 3 different releases, you have to think too.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure they started like the first one was like a month after. I might be right. 23rd of October 2018, and the game came out in September. So,
So yeah, the first one was only a couple weeks later.
which
Yeah,
yeah,
they were all
it
they
was
were
like
all
a month
done.
and a bit. So it
Yeah,
was
you're
done
totally
by
right.
yeah, it was done by the end of the year it came out. So it came out September, and it was all
Okay.
released by the end of December, right?
So yeah, so maybe we don't get it then.
And the fact that we haven't had anything announced makes me think that we're all talking about DLC, and we're all, we're talking about, oh, this plaque and oh, this secret room, blah blah blah. This all hints at DLC, but I don't know if it hints at DLC as much as it hints at ideas they didn't have time to work on, or stuff they had to cut, or things they were just sort of like thinking about, and it's just been left in the game
Or
hidden
like
away, and
or laying
we get.
threads for the next game, you know?
Oh, I mean stuff that we've had to, like, break into, like, someone's had to, like, glitch through a wall and see a bunch of stuff,
Oh,
and
yeah,
people have
yeah.
gone, "This is what the DLC is about." It's like, well, no, they've just you've seen content they've decided to not put in the game at the last minute, but haven't officially removed.
So that's the other rumor that's been coming out this week is that there's a nod to Daredevil in
Yes,
Spider-Man 2 that's been
yeah,
discovered, and some people are like, is there a Daredevil game in development? Will
yeah,
Daredevil maybe appear in a DLC that maybe has to do with something like Kingpin or one of the other characters that Spider-Man and Daredevil share?
mhm.
A lot of
But
options there.
that that nod is the thing that is you have to glitch through a wall. There was another nod that was
Right.
in the game that people were like, "Oh, this must mean there's a Daredevil game," and that was that the Murdoch and Nelson sign was gone. We spoke about this on the podcast a couple of
We
weeks
did.
ago. A patch has since put that back in, so that was just a bug.
Just
That
yeah,
was
just
just
some
something they
just
missed
an
in
error.
development. That wasn't actually anything to do. So I think a lot of everything to do with DLC for Spider-Man right now is wishful thinking, I think. It's
Yeah.
loose threads and stuff like that. The only sort of concrete thing we did get today is that Insomniac consider Miles Morales to be their main Spider-Man going forward. So, like you said, with the introduction of Silk and all these things they've got going on, we could even get a smaller Miles Morales sized game,
Yeah.
with the things on some the pulls on some of these threads and ties some of them off.
I think you're right.
But yeah, again, that's also me speculating as well. It's all speculation.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. What am I saying?
You got to imagine that that's something that they're interested in doing, though, considering how successful it was for them. You know,
Yeah.
because I mean, I would guess that we either get a Miles like 2, right? That's another spinoff, not spinoff, but like another Miles centric story. And that Spider-Man 3 will be like a big world, escalation type plot. And that'll bring Peter back out of retirement and he'll be the supporting character to
Hmm.
Miles in the way that Miles was the supporting character uh, for most of that story, right? And then it kind of
Yeah.
changes hands. That's kind of my guess.
Crazy. We're going to be 35 years old when we play that.
I know.
Awful thinking.
Yeah, but hey, you know what? I'm looking forward to it. And then we know they've got a multiplayer game that they did a job listing for. It seems like it's supposed to be a new IP, but that's all we know about it for now. So then, Naughty Dog, we've obviously got The Last of Us Factions, which is in active tortured development. We'll see if that ever comes out. There's been multiple rumors about A Last of Us Part 3, and then there's also been conversation about the idea that they are working on a new IP, and there's been some rumors that it's potentially in like a fantasy, like a high fantasy type setting. So I mean, those are all so up in the air.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't expect any of them anytime soon.
I wonder if the show has slowed down a lot of this stuff because, Neil's been busy with it and,
I would
it's
think
got
for
to take a
part
lot.
3 it would, right? A Last of Us
Mhm.
Part 3 would have been slowed down by his work on the show and the fact that he's running the studio now,
Yeah.
whereas the new IP is supposed to be developed by Kurt Margino, who is the co-director on The Last of Us Part 2. So the idea that he's heading up a team that's working on something new, that makes sense to me, and maybe that's something we even see by the end of this generation because maybe it's been in development since Tilo 2 ended.
Absolutely.
And we know that obviously Factions is being worked on by a different lead developer as well. I forget the person's name right now, but I mean, we'll see what happens there. They laid a ton of people off, and you
Yeah.
know, who
Not
knows?
looking good.
My guess is the next thing we see from them is the new IP before we get another Last of Us 3. So then we got Pixel Opus, who we talked about. They got shut down, so nothing from them. San
Oh, yeah.
Diego is the team that does MLB The Show. They will be working on the next MLB The Show. Sony Santa Monica, obviously God of War,
Mhm.
and this is an interesting one. There is a rumor that has been making the rounds this past week that there's going to be a God of War either DLC or like an expandalone game like Miles Morales. That's like a spinoff, and that it may is reportedly going to be revealed by the end of the year, and that we may even see it at the Game Awards later this year. I think that's one that makes a ton of sense. I know you and I talked about it when we reviewed the game last year. That like the game obviously sets up new stories for both Kratos and Atreus moving
Yes.
forward. You could follow either of those characters in a spinoff, and I think there's something to do there. So my guess would be Atreus, but
I
you
say we
know,
do both. I say we do both.
you got to imagine it's coming, right? Like, and we know that they've also got their next big IP in development. Corey Barlog's been leading a team for, I mean, basically since a year or so, whatever, after 2018 God of War. So
Mhm.
that's got to be, a couple years in at this point. He's been teasing that it's like going to be a sci-fi, space kind of angle. So you
Which
know,
honestly, I would love to see the worlds they created for God of War and the visuals and how, like, impressive that is. I'd love to see that with, more sci-fi design or just, like, huge, skyscapes in space and, I would just love to see that.
me too. And like Cory Barlog is a guy who, after what he did with 2018, like he's a director I'm interested in whatever he wants to do next.
Mhm.
The idea that they as a studio are working on a new IP is super exciting because
Absolutely.
as much as we love getting installments in the old stuff or reviving old stuff and recontextualizing it like they did with God of War, um, I'm hungry for something new from some of these minds for sure. So Sucker Punch, we know that it's Ghost of Tsushima, right? That's what they're working on. They're working on Ghost 2.
Yeah.
And who knows how long it's gonna be. I think that's a game I could totally see uh them announcing like next year, and maybe it's a year or two away, or it's a game I could see being a few years away, because obviously Ghost just came out in 2020. It's not that long ago.
Yeah.
3 years, but, you know,
And they had DLC, sort of like
that's a good point.
expansion
Iki
come
Island
out.
came out, right?
Which I need to play actually. I really need to play that.
It's fun. Yeah, it's more Ghost, but I fucking love Ghost. So,
Mhm.
that's one I can't wait to hear about, but I am not holding my breath. The first game was such a triumph that I imagine they wanna take their time with it and, you know, um, really stick the landing and establish this as, like, another big tentpole franchise for them.
Mhm.
So then we've got Firewalk is another more recent acquisition. That was one that they bought this year. And they are working on a game called Concord, which we saw at the last PlayStation showcase. It is a PvP game in space. Um, we know that it's supposed to be, I believe it's supposed to be an FPS. A lot of the folks associated with it are veterans of FPS type games. But it's been in active development for 2 years. So, I wouldn't expect to see it soon.
Yeah.
So then let's see. We've got a new studio that they established called PlayStation Studios Visual Arts, and they're allegedly working on a new Uncharted project. That's been the rumor. They were the team that was associated with the Uncharted remake. That like I think they were originally working on the Last of Us remake before it got pulled and Naughty Dog took it in house. And then since then, people have heard that they're working on a remake of Uncharted or like a remaster or potentially a new Uncharted game that's supposed to be, starring Drake's child, right? But that was part of this leak that has some veracity questions, right? So, what the studio is actually working on is really anybody's guess at this point.
Yeah. For a new studio, they're not sort of released anything yet, have they really? But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Either of those projects sounds good. It'd be interesting to see what a team that's not Naughty Dog does with The Last of Us. Sorry, Uncharted for The Last of
Yeah.
Us. Moron.
I mean, Uncharted is also just like a franchise I think would be fun to see come back in whatever capacity. Like it's, the whole like pulp action adventure thing is like
Mhm.
it's not a well-worn genre in games or modern media anymore. And, I think like a Cassie story where maybe you've got Sam like in the Sully role or somebody like Chloe or Nadine or whatever, right? Like, I think that could be a fun time. And like Naughty Dog's not gonna do it, right? So like pass the torch.
Yeah.
So then we got Bungie, right? We know they're working on Marathon. We know they're working on Destiny 2, the
Mhm.
final shape. Both of those have been delayed. So, you know, we'll see what happens. They're also apparently working on another AAA third person action game that's supposed to be like a esports type experience called Matter. And then there's been rumors of a Destiny mobile game or a mobile version of Destiny. So, you know, lots in development there, but obviously they just had a bunch of major layoffs. They lost about 8% of the studio.
Yeah.
Revenue targets are down on Destiny 2. So, they're also a studio that I think is, in a point of transition. So you hope
I think so.
all this stuff comes together.
Yes, you really do.
All right, so let's move on to our last two categories here. This is our second party and third party developers. So the second party guys are folks that are currently you know, in a contract with Sony, right, to create an exclusive game. And then a couple of the third party folks are people that we have rumors of that they are working on with Sony on something, or in some cases, we know that they're actively partnering on something. So for second party, the first one we've got is Deviation Games. That is that new studio that was spun up a couple of years ago. I believe it was in 2020 originally that we first learned about them. They're a team of ex Call of Duty developers. They are working on a AAA original IP. It's supposed to be a live service game. It's been in development for a couple of years, since 2021, and Sony kind of trotted them out at one of their big events and talked about how they were excited to be working on this revolutionary new IP and this new shooter, and that PlayStation was going to be their development partner. Since then, they've had massive layoffs at the studio.
Yeah.
90 people were affected. And remember, I said before that they had 100 people that were working on this game.
Yes.
So that's
There's just 10 people right now just slamming on keyboards, desperately like, "Hey, it'll be out soon, it'll be out soon."
so that's tough. And
Really tough.
the game, there's a rumor that has been, getting circulated that the game is canceled at this point, and that or that it's had its budget massively cut, and that's led to this now trickle of folks left working on it. So,
Yeah.
um, there was a conversation that this studio was going to work on this game and then potentially be acquired and become a part of the first party. But after all these layoffs and everything, it's like increasingly seeming like they may never release anything, actually. So then we've got Arrowhead, who is the team behind Helldivers. We know that they're working on Helldivers 2.
An actual game, a game that we know we've seen.
And it has a release date, Max.
Oh, yes.
February 8th, 2024. The only PlayStation game on this list that has a date.
Oh, it's only taken an hour.
Yeah. So look forward to Helldivers 2 next year, everybody. Might be the only PlayStation game we get. Then we got Lucid Games. They are the team who worked on Destruction All Stars. They are rumored to be working on a new Wipeout game for PS5 and PSVR 2. XDev, who's one of their support studios, is supposed to be working on these games as well.
Mhm.
Knowing what Destruction All Stars turned out to be, you
And
have your reservations.
the fact that they had, Twisted Metal supposedly taken off them as well, that's not a great sign for the develop
Yeah.
for the studio really, is it?
So, and it kind of feels like it's like, all right, we'll give you the lesser known Crazy Car
Yeah,
IP
you
and
have
see what you do with
Wipeout.
that.
You have Wipeout, yeah. I mean,
Shout out to
I think
Wipeout though.
I'd say I prefer Wipeout, but yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, hopefully it comes together. This is another one that, like, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And then
Yeah, we will.
Ballistic Moon is another new studio that is working on a game called Project Bates is its code name. It's a survival horror game, and it's got a bunch of people who originally worked on Until Dawn, and there is a rumor circling around that Sony has actually already acquired this studio. So this is another one that seems like is supposed to be coming out and, working on another one of these narrative choice AAA type experiences.
I thought these, like, acquisition stuff had to be public just because are Sony not a publicly owned company, or are they privately owned?
They're publicly traded.
So
Um,
surely all of these things should be public knowledge if they have been acquired, right? How can there be a rumor that they bought something? Surely everyone would
so
know.
it was 9 months ago that this rumor happened,
Baby could
and
happen in that time.
it said it was according to a website called PitchBook, which is a financial data and software company that looks like, yeah, it says here they had a status update that year that said acquired slash merged. And then it listed their parent company as Sony. So,
Alright, fine.
there's also a chance that that's just a mistake, I guess, on the chance or on the side of this website, right? That they're reporting that they're the parent company because they're publishing their game. But
Yeah. Yeah, it
yeah,
just seems like it's weird that you'd have a rumor that a company's bought another company when surely a company buying a company is, like, something that stockholders would want to know about, and if that's the case, then it'd
Yeah.
be public knowledge. I don't know. I don't know how business works, I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know how that works when it comes to an acquisition. I
Yeah.
know that, I think mergers have to be publicly announced, but I think a
Mhm.
large company acquiring a small company, I don't know how that would work, and I could see that being something that maybe you time alongside the reveal of their first project, and maybe it's I don't know. But, I mean, we'll know soon enough, right? Because Sony's financial report, for, next year is gonna come out in only a couple months. So,
Mhm.
if they did acquire them, we should have, confirmation sooner than later.
I wish Steve was here, he'd know.
So then on the third party side of things, we got From Software. There's a rumor that they're working on another exclusive game for PlayStation. Obviously, people were thinking that it would be a Bloodborne 2. Apparently, the rumor claims that it is not a
Just
Bloodborne
just
sequel.
do it. Just do it already. It's not hard. You've got all the good bits. Just do more of the good bits. Just do it. Sorry about that. Don't know where
Nope.
that came from.
You're good. You're good. And then it is worth pointing this out. I didn't know this that Sony got increased to a 14% stake in the company
Yeah,
as of
they
2022.
bought a bunch of bits. I remember this happening, and I wondered what that would mean.
Yeah.
So far, literally nothing, from what I can tell, but it could be a business decision because of how well Elden Ring did. You never know.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I think if From Software is willing to be acquired, then
Mhm.
Sony would be insane to
Mhm.
not acquire them.
I don't think I would enjoy that, but I do appreciate that they're willing to support them. Um, but we also know they're looking to expand their publishing rights anyway. I think this week, FromSoft said, "Oh yeah, we're going to start publishing stuff as well as sort of uh,
Yeah.
making stuff." So it seems like they want to remain independent, sort of like how Platinum Games weren't that open to being picked up or anything. So
Right. Right. And I mean, I think I agree with you. That would be preferable. I would love to see From Software become an independent publishing house. That would be very
yeah,
interesting to see what kind of games they would publish and champion. Um, but I think if you're Sony, I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that they look at as a long-term goal because obviously FromSoft is, a darling of the third-person open world action game right now, and that's Sony's whole bag, right? So, getting them in-house would obviously be a huge triumph, if PlayStation was able to pull that off. So, but I think even getting another exclusive game from them is huge, right? Like that's a massive opportunity for them to have a banger on their hands that is a console seller for a lot of people.
I want to quickly do you a big favor and say that I've looked through the rest of what we've got in the list here, and there's only one other actual PlayStation exclusive game on here.
Hit it.
That is a questionable PlayStation exclusive game from Remedy Studios, who just released Alan Wake 2. They're working on Control 2. They're working on Max Payne 1 and 2 remake, but they apparently have a PlayStation exclusive game, and we actually know nothing about it really, other than the fact that it's happening. So who knows what it could be? I think there's a lot going on with Remedy, and I think that's really great considering the strength of what they've been putting out recently.
Yeah, they're really like I feel like they're a studio on the rise right now. And like they've always made good games, but I mean like they have increased financial success, increased critical attention,
Mhm.
and like it seems like, um they can't really do anything wrong right now, between Control 2 and Alan Wake 2 obviously just popped off. They're working on
Oh
that
yeah,
Max
massively.
Payne project with Rockstar. They've got that multiplayer game in development with Tencent behind it.
Yeah,
So the idea of them putting out another like high profile exclusive for PlayStation would be pretty big.
yeah, definitely.
All
That's
right.
it. I think
I
we're
think
done.
that's it. So
Oh
obviously we didn't get to Xbox today, but that's all right. We're
yeah,
gonna
that
have
was
to
yeah.
have to save that one for a part two, I guess, huh, Max?
We'll get Steve back next week, and we'll get Steve to talk about the Xbox stuff with us. I mean, I don't own an Xbox, so I can't get excited about any of it, but I'll be there. I'll be there to talk about it anyway.
Talk about it. You got a
Sound
PC.
bites.
So if
I do have a
it's on
PC. I
PC,
do have a
you
PC. You are
play right
right.
there. Great.
Hmm.
So we'll wrap it up there for today. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. Remember, if you want to get involved, if you want to write into the show, if you want to keep the conversation rolling between episodes over on the Discord, or if you want to go above and beyond, just like our fabulous Patreon producers, and show your support for the show and back us financially, you can do all of that and much, much more on flipscreen.games. That's our website where you'll find links to our Discord, our Patreon, our sister shows, our email address, however you choose to get involved or join the community. We thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Flip Screen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Max. We'll see you next week.
Ta